Okay, Madam Chair, the meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Welcome everybody to this evening's town council meeting. This is April 27th, 2020. And we're going to open the meeting with a public hearing for the general government and Board of Education budget from the chairman of our Board of Finance, Mr. John Leary. John, welcome, and we're going to give you the floor for the public hearing.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Triano and members of the Town Council. It's always a pleasure to come before you. And as you know, this is a recommendation, not a mandate. According to our charter, the Board of Finance works on the budget. They vote on a budget, they recommend a budget, and then the Town Council will take that budget and move it forward. But before I begin, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope all of our citizens and taxpayers are doing the best they can in this situation. And the Board of Finance is certainly aware of our best to consider the impact of COVID-19 when we got our budget. I don't have any prepared remarks, so I'm going to be working off of the document that I shared, and I ask that you could put it into the minutes. But we started out this budget year by offering some guidance. The guidance came back. We were in a good place, and without guessing, I would have thought we would have pretty much approved the budget very close to how it was presented. It was responsible, well put together, and it fell very, very close to the guidance we offered. But then with COVID-19, the impact on the community, we had to drop back and reassess because all this happened while we were working on the budget. So we did try and factor that in, but our job is to offer a budget that's responsible for the town, and it's very financial based. And I'll now walk you through it. If you have my paper, I'm going to start from the top, or actually what I'll do is I'll share the document. Well, now just to make sure that I'm sharing. You tell me if you see it come up.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through our revenue, our expenses, only in a few minutes, our revenue, our expenses, and come to the conclusion of what our vote was on the budget. Our vote ended up being a 4-2 vote, a bipartisan vote. We had 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats voting in favor of this recommendation, and we had 2 Republicans voting against it. And I'll tell you more about that as we get into it. So let me start by talking about our grand list. Our grand list moved from $4.068 billion to $4.157 billion. That's the total value of our taxable property in town. That change was an $88 million increase to property, and that change represented a 2.18% increase to property. So what could drive that? That could be that more property was added, property that was not there last year was added. It could be somebody sold an old car and bought a new car and put a piece of property on our list. It could be a business that went out and purchased more equipment, and the equipment showed up. We did not have a revaluation, so this is a purely growth in the grand list. A lot of this could be attributed back to economic development, which doesn't always happen by chance. It really doesn't happen properly by chance. It happens through a lot of good work in marketing our town and setting aside certain areas for certain purposes and trying to attract people and businesses into the community and strategically do that to try and get the maximum impact of grand list growth in the places you want it, in the way you want it under the zoning laws you have. But we were very, very happy to have higher than expected, higher than trend grand list growth. So because of that, what we do is we take the growth in the grand list times the current mill rate, not the new mill rate, but the current mill rate, and we call that tax revenue generated at the current mill rate. So if the same people in town paid the very same taxes and this new property came along and paid taxes, the new property would give us 2.7 million of new tax revenue.
What?
Again, that's not people who already pay their taxes unless they went out and bought a new car or put an addition on their property. But this is the new property in town being taxed.
You're back, but I'm going to put you to bed.
Hi, I'm sorry. Erica, can you please put your phone on mute?
Okay, so what we have here is the new tax generated is on the new property. It's on the grand list growth, and that was $2.7 million. And it was, and it came because of the grand list growth. Then our recommendation, which we'll get to later, called 0.42% mill rate increase, very minimal, 0.42. And from that increase, that recommended increase, we get another $549,000. The numbers do have a rounding in them, but for a high-level conversation, they're good. So what we're looking at is a change in our tax revenue from 124.7 million to $128 million, which is a 2.62% change in our tax revenue. Or 3.3 million new tax dollars this year coming into the town. And remember that 2.7 of that is from grand list growth, and 550,000 is from the recommended increase to the mill rate. And we'll talk more. So let's talk about revenue. Where does the town of Southington get its revenue? Well, we get state grants for education, and we get state grants that are not for education. But when you add that up, last year, in the current year we're in, that was about $22 million, and it still is. So you can see that pretty much stayed relatively the same. We get $22 million from the state. Town services, we bill out for town services. That stayed pretty flat at $1.4 million current year and the budgeted year. Education services, that's when Board of Ed bills out, and that's relatively, it says 7% increase, but it's relatively flat when you look at it in the big picture. We have licenses, permits, and fees. Those are the licenses, permits, and fees that we charge folks for. And again, 43,000, we're seeing slight increases in there, but I at a high level, I call it pretty flat. Investment revenue, this is disappointing, but it's a sign of the times. We a while back started in a program. Many of you remember we brought in a town treasurer. We started to look at cash flows when we had sources of cash, when we collected it, when we needed it, and when we didn't need it, we had idle cash. The biggest piece of idle cash is our rainy day fund, but the rest is when we collect taxes in July and we collect taxes in January. That is a big chunk coming in at once. We don't need it all in July and January, so that idle cash gets invested. There are limits to what you can invest it in, very conservative rules on that, but our investment committee invests that money, and this current year we have a budget to get 1.2 million interest, and now we had to lower that to 683. So that's a big decrease because interest rates are low, and that's because the federal government has lowered the interest rates to stimulate growth. Some of that is a response to the COVID-19 and to stave off a recession or worse. And then there's just other revenue, and there's a lot more detail in the book. So high level, our revenue stayed pretty flat. It's 268,000 lower. The biggest driver to that is the decrease in investment revenue. But we will be getting a 25.8 million in from non-tax. That's just the grants and the fees we bill out. Property tax will bring us 128.4 million, and then we're going to utilize the fund balance. In governmental accounting, under the governmental accounting standards, when you take money out of it's called fund accounting. When you take money from a fund, you declare it as income, and when you use that money, you declare it as expense. I don't like that, but of course, nobody, they don't consult me when they write the government accounting standards. So I see this at church and I see this here in the town. So what I've done was I've stripped that out because I don't think taking money from our bank account and using it should constitute revenue. That was revenue once upon a time when we generated it, in my mind. So I took it out, and down below I have net revenue less fund balance utilized. So you can see that our revenue is up $3.2 million, and it's up 2.12%. That's revenue, and those are our sources from tax and from the state grants and the fees. I'll pause here if there are any questions, not questions from the town council. If not, I'll go into expenses. And we'll have time for questions at the end, of course.
Any council members have any questions of the chairman? I don't hear any, I don't see any, John. So why don't you go on?
I'll go on. So there's our revenue of 154 million, up 3.2 from last year. Then we have our expenses. Our biggest expense, and we are one town, but education is a piece of that. So that went from 98.8 to 100.7. That's up $2 million. Debt service, we're paying stuff bonded, and we took on debt for that. A lot of our school renovations are some of the biggest items on there. And to service that, we have to pay back every year our principal and interest on that. So we're paying back around $11 million. Relatively speaking, that's pretty flat. Public safety, I just lumped a few things here. The book breaks them all out in detail, but public safety costs us about 14.6 million. Public works cost around 6 million. Employee benefits are all grouped and handled together. They cost 10.6 million.
Wash your hands carefully, but at home I have really good poison ivy stuff I just bought at Walmart.
Excuse me, would people please mute their phone while we're going over the budget? Thank you so much. John, continue, please.
Yes, and then we're down to other services of 11 million. And that gets to our 154 323. You can see that's the same number as up above because we have a balanced budget, which means that our revenue equals our expenses. It doesn't quite happen by chance because here in this government budgeting, what we do is we look at what we have for expenses, we get those right, and then we back into the revenue we needed by levying taxes. So it's only logical that our revenue would equal our expenses. And then going down below, I put back in the rainy day fund because up here we had it in revenue. The same number we have in revenue comes back in expenses, and we 58.8 against 158.8 of expenses, a balanced budget. Let's take a look at this use of the excess rainy day fund. We have a rainy day fund policy. We have a floor, we have a ceiling, we have far more in there than the ceiling. We're in a very healthy financial position. Thank everybody in town that we are, because we're going to need this to get through the COVID-19. We're going to need this for any payment flexing plans that are offered to our citizens. And it's a very good position to be in, and many towns are not in the position we're in. This is good work of many people over many years. So anyway, we're going to be taking 2.9 million in this budget from the excess in the rainy day fund, not the rainy day fund, but the amount in excess of the ceiling that we wanted to keep in there. We're going to take 2.9 million and we're going to use that to purchase the North Center building, the John Weichel Municipal Center, which was part of the original plan back when the building was sold and then leased back. And then the other $1.8 million that sits in there is going to get used for, you'll see it down below when we talk about capital. So that's pretty much our revenue and our expenses. And then we'll talk about some new additions. So what I do is I go through the budget and I lift out things that are new or things that town council should be aware of. And the rest of the budget is just normal growth in the services and the service levels that we have currently provided that where there haven't been any great changes. In this budget, we have the addition of 2 new police officers. The town is growing. We hear this every year. And this was the year where we let come through the hiring of 2 new police officers. But remember that it's not as simple as 216,000 because the police department budget also saw a reduction to the overtime. It's a 2-part strategy here to bring the 2 police officers on. So that'll come with a net cost of 217,000 annual dollars. But it has been justified through us, and we left it in, recommended to you that we hire these 2 new police officers. Now, other than that, the other items are capital. Capital meaning they're large in nature, and they relate not to operations, but to the infrastructure itself. So the library, we have these in here. Again, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The library is in here at 13.9 million, and we're expected to bond it. So we're going to borrow the money for that, should that pass. If it's deferred, it's deferred. It doesn't affect this budget.
Excuse me, John, I'm going to just stop you right now because I know that Tom Lombardi has a comment and a quick question. And then following Tom, I know that Chris Palmieri also has a question. So is it all right if we take them right now?
Sure, let's take them now.
Okay, Tom Lombardi, please.
Thank you, Chairman Triano. I will, my question is related to the current year surplus line, so I'll let Chairman Leary continue on a little bit, and then I'll ask my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris, would you like to ask now, or do you want to put it off?
No, if I could, just before we get too far, if that's okay.
Sure.
John, can you explain, you talked about the rainy day fund, and then you in your grid, excess rainy day fund. Can you elaborate on the excess rainy day fund and how you used it for this budget?
Yes, we have in there, and I should have had that out in my book, in the CAFR. I could ask Amelia to jump in here. I just want to get the percents right. What percent of revenue? Amelia, if you could just join me here for a second. Pages of the consolidated financial report to look for the paragraph on the financial policies.
And John, just to be specific, I obviously know we're using some of the fund for the municipal center purchase. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what's utilized in the operating budget that you mentioned earlier. Not because I know you talked about the municipal center as well. That I understand completely. I'm more interested in the operating budget.
Okay, let me tell you about that now. And while I'm doing that, I'll ask that Amelia just pull the policy so we have the right percents, that we know what the floor is, the ceiling. So what's happening here right now is the use of the rainy day fund. Every year we end up with a surplus, meaning that we budget, we give the authorization to spend at a higher level than we actually spend. And when we don't spend at that level, we generate a surplus. That surplus could be generated from not spending at the level we budgeted to spend at, or by getting more revenue than we budgeted to achieve. So whether if our revenue is above budget, spending is below budget, or a combination of both, we generate a surplus. That surplus automatically finds its way into the rainy day fund. The official name of the rainy day fund is the undesignated fund balance. It's an amount of money in the general fund that is not designated for anything, and it has the nickname the rainy day fund. So what we like to do with that, the rainy day fund in general is there for emergencies, one-time unique purchases, and to pay down debt. And those are 3 of the generally accepted uses of the rainy day fund. So when we have excess rainy day fund, we have more than what we want to keep in there per the financial policy. We could take some of that back out and apply it to capital in the new year. So what you're seeing here, a lot of this is the surplus. Is a surplus from prior years that we are now pulling out and using in the current year for capital. When I go down below, the capital, I'll show you where that money is actually being used. So we know that 2.9 million of it is going to be used for the purchase of municipal center. When we get down in here, you can see that 430 is going to be for the police department roof, 240 for 2 new dump trucks with plows, 150 for the 2 leaf machines, and 770 for the park improvements at Memorial and Panthorn. All of that is paid for from prior year, out of the rainy day fund above the amount that we agreed to keep in there. So let me, yeah.
John, while you're on this screen, so I'm looking at what you have. It says excess rainy day fund. It's roughly 625 million, but you said it was 2.9 million. Where did that 2.9 million come from?
Okay, you take 2.9 is the purchase of municipal center. Here,
Oh, okay.
Here's the use of it right here. It's 4490
Yeah.
in this year. Go down here in the capital. All of this section here is how much of the capital capital expenditures are going to come from the use of the excess rainy day fund. You see the 2.9 for the purchase of municipal center, and then you see these 4 other items that we're using prior year surplus for. Again, the police department roof, 240,000 for 2 new dump trucks with plows and bodies. They're expensive because they have the bodies on them and the plow and the stuff for the snow. 150,000 for 2 new leaf loaders, a big one and a smaller one. And then 770,000 is going to go to the first phase of park improvements, which targets Memorial and Panthorn Park. It's new tennis courts and multiple other improvements in those parks. That's the 4490 excess rainy day fund.
So John or Mark, is this what we've been calling budget reallocation funds? Is that because?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, the next column is budget reallocation funds. John will cover that in a second.
So let me go down and then we'll circle back, because it's a good question. So the 3 things we were going to bond if we go forward with them. Now remember, if we go forward with them, we bond them. If we don't do them, we don't bond them. And regardless of what we do, it doesn't affect this year's budget materially. So the first one is the library at 13.9. The next one is 10 for the road and bridges in general. That's the normal amount we feed into maintaining our roads and bridges, because the state grants are nowhere near enough to maintain the amount of roads we have, that we have to do our own self-maintenance, and that comes through here. And then this Plantsville pump station is in here. But when we do this, we'll borrow the money for and pay it back over time. So it's not a current operating expense. It'll show up later in debt service in future years. Here come the ones, Chris, I think that you're asking. The ones that you're saying, well, these are the ones that are going to be paid for by an anticipated surplus in the current year. We're going to design or manage, or we think we're going to come out with a surplus that's going to fund this 1.559 million. And that's the high school sound system, the town hall renovations, which is the cupola and a doorway down in the assessor's office. It's 2 fuel tanks. They've got a bunch to remove. They have 5 to remove, the Board of Ed, but they want to pull the one out of Alta and Darrenowski, the 2 of them this year. The townwide air conditioning and heating systems, IT. Again, some little stuff in highway and park, a couple of mowers, a sander, and 2 trailers. The public safety radio system is now on a managed contract, meaning that it's we don't own it. We pay for it over time, and so that comes with a fee, but it is capital because it's equipment related, so it falls into our capital budget. And then putting up Spring Street, doing some Board of Ed paving, doing a phase of our street signs. All of our street signs have to become bigger and more reflective, and we have a program to do that over time. To buy 1 vehicle for the fire department, not a fire truck, more of a SUV type vehicle, and equip it. and then put 200,000 into our roads and 250 into our sidewalks with a focus on the school access sidewalks, which we have about, I think it's at 13 miles worth to do a piece of that. So that's going to come from a surplus in the current year, not anticipating because we didn't budget properly, but anticipating because revenue is higher than we budgeted and we're curtailing other expenses elsewhere to be able to make this happen. Again, the use of the fund balance is the 4.9 that we talked about, the roof on the police department, the 2 new dump trucks, the 2 leaf blowers, and the Memorial and Panthorn Park improvements, plus the purchase of Municipal Center. Then with a grant, these are our normal grants. They're small. You can see they're not enough to do much of our roads at all, but we have our LoSiP and our Town Aid for Roads grant. So that's going to go into our capital, but be grant funded. That comes from the state. And then the good news and the sad part is cash funding out of this budget for our road program is only $312,000. The Board of Finance, trying to put forth an even more conservative budget that we started with, have already pulled out of here $288,000, and we're down now to $312,000, and it's tight. That pretty much is our capital budget. So 31.7 million. That's what we're putting into capital this year.
Yeah. John, I want to just, I see that Val DiPaolo, Councilwoman DiPaolo has a question. Val, would you go ahead and just ask it now?
Yes, thanks, Vicki. John, I'm just going back to the rainy day fund and the surplus and the excess. Are there any like spending policies associated with those? Or you had mentioned a financial policy.
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to have you go too deep just because I'm new to this.
Want to talk to her, John?
Okay, I will in a second. I'm just going to ask Amelia the percentages of how the thing is structured. But first, I just want to say, again, rainy day fund comes from having a surplus. It comes from not either getting too much revenue or cutting back expenses. And each year when you read the paper, the town of Southington generates a surplus. And that surplus then lands in the rainy day. What we've done with it over the past many years, when I first started this back in 2009, we had not reached our minimum in the rainy day fund, and we were building it. And then in 2010, I believe, we put together the first balanced budget, and the rainy day fund was where we wanted it to be per policy. And then at some point, we even increased the policy amount to have a very conservative rainy day fund. And then we ended up with more in there than the policy. So we call that excess rainy day fund. And then each year, we scrape off a portion of the excess and use it for capital, because it is taxpayer money. And again, somebody would always say the best place for taxpayer money is in the taxpayer's pocket, not really in the town. So every new year, we go to this rainy day fund, make sure we have it where we want it, take the rest and use it for capital. That's the excess. The real rainy day fund is the rainy day fund itself. If we ever wanted to tap into the official rainy day fund, not the excess, but the rainy day fund itself, we're advised, and the bond agencies watch what we do with it. So what they'll do is they'll want us to use it for an emergency. If something were to happen and we could document a particular emergency and use it. Some towns will use it for a big storm where trees fall down and damage occurs. The time when we had to shovel the roofs, we were able to do all that and never touch ours. Other towns had to go into it. Or we may have a one-time opportunity. Just say, for example, land went up for sale right behind one of the schools we wanted to expand. And we said, boy, if we don't buy it, somebody else will buy it. So this immediately gives us the ability. It's a one-time opportunity. The town council could say, we want to take 10 million of this rainy day fund and buy that land, or buy land next to our town hall, whatever it may be. A one-time opportunity. And so it's really emergencies, one-time opportunities, or we want to pay down debt. The rating agencies always look favorably if we went to our rainy day fund and said, you know what, interest rates are getting really high, the servicing on our debt is is much higher than we'd like it to be. Let's take 5 million and pay it down. That would be an appropriate use of the rainy day fund. So conversely, what would not be a good use of the rainy day fund is to use it for operations. Then you're starting to enter the death spiral. When a family, a town, a business has to go to the bank and start using savings for regular operations, that's a symptom of a problem. And the rating agencies will hone right in on that. And they'll say, what's happening here? And they'll start to look at our situation more closely. We have a very good bond rating, and a lot of it is because we're very careful in managing the rainy day fund, which goes back years of good management. So that's an excellent question, Councilwoman DePaula.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure, no problem at all. Anyone else have any questions for John at this time?
Councilwoman Triano, I will make more comment.
Yeah, that would be great. Go ahead, Tom.
And thank you, Chairman Leary. As always, a very clear and direct presentation. It's very helpful for the public, especially for those who may not be as involved as maybe the Board of Finance or the Town Council is on these issues. But I actually, as you were explaining your items to Councilman Palmieri, you did address where my question was going, and that was to clarify the definition of the current year surplus, and that is those items listed on your report are the items that will be done in the future from the current year surplus. The way I originally read the document was that the surplus was due to those items. So you did clarify those items. Thank you.
Yes, good point of clarification. All of these items here, the 1.6 million, will be from a surplus we don't have yet, that we intend to have by June 30th. And this is from the surplus we have already and are taking out our rainy day fund. The roads are grant funded, and this is a little bit of cash funding that we need. The next thing I just wanted to point out before I get to the complete conclusion, I think we have to always be reminded, and it's a point that I've made at the meeting, and this, for the entire time up to this point, I was speaking as chair of the Board of Finance. Now I'll just speak as a member for a moment, then go back, put the chairman's hat back on. When in town, there's been intense focus on a 0% tax increase or a very minimal tax increase, and especially in conservative groups, when we had the Tea Party influence and you always heard 0, 0, cut it back, cut it back. And just remember that when you could reduce a service if you want to, when you could eliminate a service, or when you can do something much more efficiently and you either need less people or less resources to do it. Achieving the low tax increase without achieving the savings to go with it generally squeezes capital. And what we end up with are stretch things further. We end up with trucks and cars that are older, or buildings that become in need of repair. And capital our roads, our what's underneath the roads, pipes and drainage. All of that stuff will suffer because that's easy to cut. You just say we're going to do less of it. But what's a little harder to cut is to really get in and cut a program or cut a service or a service level. You hate to say it, but eliminate employees, structural things. And if we don't make the structural things, but yet we achieve the low tax rate, we're really squeezing capital. Now I'll put the chairman hat back on. And employees, we have to remember that in town, there's been numbers of 1,600, but when they're trimmed back to full-time equivalents.
John, excuse me, John, I'm so sorry. I know you're getting to wind it up, but Councilman Del Santo did have a question before you close. So could we take Mike's question first?
Sure.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Mike, go ahead.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, very good presentation so far. And I wasn't sure whether to ask this when you wrapped up or ask you now. So if you tell me we'll wait, we'll talk about that after you wrap up, we can do so. So you're talking surpluses. We talk a little bit about some of the surpluses that may be coming about through the Board of Education with school being out. Primarily, I want to focus on the busing. I know we've had some emails go back and forth over the past few days about the busing. I know they're on paper, it would appear to be a significant savings, seeing that we pay close to $21,000 per day for busing, and seeing that busing hasn't happened from March 17th, and it probably won't occur up until June 15th. Some quick math is close to a $1.2 million savings. I know the governor put an executive order out there saying that these companies need to be paid, but I guess my question is, where do we stand with that number? I know we got a couple of different figures from Superintendent Cannellan, one at $25,000 in savings and one at around $120,000 in savings. So my question to you is, how do we find out what that true number could possibly be to put some of those dollars back into the coffers?
Well, two things to that question. I do not know. I've heard conflicting. Different municipalities are saying they have to continue to pay for busing even though nobody's being bused. I've heard other municipalities saying they have to split the cost, and other municipalities saying we're not paying anything at all. I think a lot of it depends on the contracts we have, and I don't know much about that. I do know that the Board of Ed will have, because of the way in which they're operating now, they will have instances where they've saved money. They will have instances where things will cost more because of how they're administering their programs, what services they're not able to administer. They may have to administer after that they just can't deliver now, especially in the area of special ed. I can't speak to all that, but I'm sure they're going to have pluses and minuses. And so I'd ask that our questions best answered by the Board of Ed chair and the superintendent once they've sat down and figured that out. I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Mark Schoda. I know that the superintendent is on if he wants to make a quick comment.
That would be great. Superintendent Cannellan, are you online right now, or audio on right now?
I'm on the phone. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please feel free to chime in at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So back when I first gave the information as a result of questions from the Board of Finance, we were under the impression, quite honestly, that we would not be paying additional dollars to New Britain Transportation, who's our contract provider. So that was early on. That was prior to the governor's executive order, and that's where the original $25,000 amount came in. Then the governor issued his executive order, and as you know, the governor's executive order holds the force of law. The governor's executive order, and I believe I shared all this information with both the town council and the Board of Finance, as well as our Board of Education members in a memo that I drafted to you, has the force of law, as I indicated. The governor crafted, through his legal counsel, the executive order under the guidance of the Federal CARES Act, which talks about, to the maximum extent appropriate or possible, that school districts need to continue to not only pay their transportation contracts, but also pay employees, et cetera. So our transportation contract, if we did not have to pay additional dollars from the time of our closure, which, as you may recall, was Monday, March 16th, through the end of the school year, would have given us about $1.2 million in savings. Based on what the governor's executive order indicates, we have been in negotiations with New Britain Transportation since the governor's executive order came out. We've been working with our legal counsel on that. The transportation industry is pretty well organized statewide. They have some national organizations also backing them. They are also hoping that the governor will issue an additional clarification or an additional executive order, which indicates we should pay 100% of those costs. So without getting too much into all the complexities, transportation providers are supposed to provide boards of education with the specifics of how much their costs are, minus, say, fuel, because they're clearly not running the buses, and minus what essentially would be considered a profit margin. Now, all the transportation contractors are essentially resisting that. We do have good relations with New Britain Transportation, but nonetheless, if I were a transportation contract provider, I would be advocating for 100% as well. We're clearly trying to negotiate less than that amount. Now, out of that $1.2 million that would be remaining, if we were to be able to arrive at a negotiated agreement, and clearly the governor's executive order indicates you need to negotiate an amendment to the contract in good faith, we would, if we were at 90% of that contract, we'd save $120,000. If we were at 80% of that contract, we'd save $240,000. There are very few districts across the state of Connecticut that have been able to negotiate those amendments with transportation contractors because, as I just mentioned, all of the contractors are holding out for 100%, and they're hoping that's what the governor is going to decree in some subsequent executive order. I do not believe that that's going to happen. At the last update that we had from the Commissioner of Education, the commissioner clearly indicated that, to his knowledge, no additional clarification is going to come forth. So we're working with Shipman and Goodwin, our legal counsel, and Shipman and Goodwin currently is working with Southington and about 40 other school districts on trying to resolve this issue. I do not see us paying 100% of the contract, but I don't see us paying probably as low as 80% of the contract, although I would hope that's the case. So we're going to be anywhere in that range. Maybe we'll save $120,000. Maybe we'll save $240,000. In all likelihood, it's going to be somewhere between those two things. It's clearly not going to be $1.2 million. I do not care what the article from the Record Journal said about Wallingford, because quite honestly, as I said in my memo, I'm not going to comment on why Wallingford said what they're saying. All I can comment is on what we're doing. We're working with our legal counsel because we know that the governor's executive order holds the force of law, and we're clearly going to fall down on complying with what the law says we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Cannell. I just, while you're on the phone, I don't know if there are any council people who might want to ask a question for further clarification. My question would be, do we have a time frame in mind when we're going to be able to see if it comes through or not, and at what percentage?
Well, goodness, that's an excellent question. And you all know Ms. Dinello. She has been really working very hard with New Britain Transportation. We've gone back and forth and back and forth. Of course, we wanted to get this settled like yesterday. But it doesn't appear as if we are going to be able to settle this. I do believe all of the transportation contractors are working together, and they're clearly trying to get 100% of the contract. And again, I understand that. It's difficult times. Nonetheless, I would welcome personally some additional direction or clarification from the governor. I would love to see some decree which says all districts across the state will settle at 80%. I haven't seen that yet. I don't know if that will come, but we literally have been working in good faith on this. And if any of you have ever been involved in collective bargaining negotiations or contract negotiations, you understand the nature of the back and forth. So we're trying to push that forward. Again, we continue to do that. It's a little frustrating on our end because we just simply don't know, and we're not able to provide you with that type of information because we just can't push it across the goal line, if you will. It's the proverbial, it takes two to tango, and we're ready to dance, but New Britain Transportation is trying to hold out, as I said, probably for 100%, just as all the other transportation contractors are. I wish I had a better answer for that. I wish I could say we can tell you exactly tomorrow, but we absolutely are not going to be able to do that.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Thank you. Chris Palmera, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Just a quick question for Tim. Tim, aside from busing, because I understand everything you're saying, but is there the savings that Sherry shared, were they anticipated up to May 20th or beyond? Again, taking busing aside.
You know, in terms of what she just reported to the Finance Committee of the board, that's all the information that we know to this point through the end of the school year.
Okay.
So to share with others who may not have that figure, we recalculated. Sherry did an additional analysis because, of course, we literally have hundreds of accounts. It's not an easy thing to do, and when we were first asked, we were asked to do a fairly quick turnaround on that. So Sherry kept working on that, and she reported this last Monday, a week from tonight ago, if you will, and that was then presented at the Board of Education meeting last Thursday, about an $850,000 amount in terms of an unexpended balance, and that's all the way, through the end of the school year. Now, any savings that we glean from the transportation contracts, whether that's 120,000, 240,000, somewhere in between, is on top of the $850,000, Chris. So it is all the way through the June 30th, which is the end of our fiscal year.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I have Jim Morelli who's asked to be heard. Jim?
Hi, everybody. This issue is really, really under my skin to the point where I've done a lot of research over the last few days. And so I'd like to read a couple of things that are actually fact, and then I have several questions. So the 7R clearly states that the municipality, the agreement to the Board of Education, determines that the contract requires amendment to more accurately reflect the actual costs incurred during the duration of the public health emergency. So, municipality, or are we part of a district, is one of my questions. It says the order is not intended to allow for broad negotiation of contracts. I understand that. We have a contract. We have to fulfill the contract. Instead, any amendment should be prompt to safeguard the employees and continuity of service. All the employees are laid off. So how does that safeguard the employees? It says nothing in the provision shall allow for a contracted company to be enriched beyond the actual reasonable costs incurred for the purposes set forth above. So my question is, why is our town attorney not involved in negotiation, and why are we one of 40 people, one of 40 communities arguing about a $1.2 million hit to our town budget? And who decides that 90% is a fair resolution? For the bus companies, they're not paying any employees, they're not buying any fuel, they're not making repairs, they're literally doing nothing, and they want 100% of their fee for the rest of the year. I think that's ridiculous.
Okay, so if I can, are you all set, Mr. Morelli?
I have two more questions, but I'd like to hear from you.
Okay, so let me answer that first, and I know Mrs. Donnell is on the line as well. We can answer that. First of all, that's the governor's executive order. The amount of information that we have requested from the transportation companies is extensive. Unfortunately, the governor's executive order did not go across the board for all school districts. And by the way, from a statutory point of view, the definition of a school district is the community. However, the Board of Education is the body that has the authority over the Board of Education budget. We have been working with Shipman and Goodwin. I mentioned 40 additional school districts. That's simply because those are clients of Shipman and Goodwin. Shipman and Goodwin happens to be our legal counsel. So I do not feel personally that we should be paying 100% of the contracts. They're not burning any fuel, as you mentioned, and certainly the profit margin should be taken out. The executive order And if you looked at the information that I forwarded, the executive order anticipates that the transportation companies would be continuing to employ all of their drivers, their mechanics, et cetera, and continuing to pay into the health insurance fund. So the types of information, or the type of information that should be coming to boards of education right now is the information that documents those payments, essentially. And it just, because they said you negotiate amendments to the contract, it puts us in a little bit of a gray area in terms of, what does that mean? What is an amendment to the contract? So we're victimized to a certain extent, and we're trying to do the very best we can. And we're also trying to take advantage of the knowledge of one of the leading authorities in education law, which is Shipman and Goodwin, in trying to help us through this process. We clearly don't want to pay 100% of the contract, but clearly the executive order indicates that we're going to pay something. It's just a matter of what that something is, and we just can't get to that resolution at this point in time. At least not yet.
Okay. I also read somewhere that the bus company or the provider has to give you basically an accounting of their expenses that they
correct
to keep their operation active and current. So do we have that? And then again, I don't understand why our town attorney's not involved in the negotiation as well.
Well, let me answer your question in two ways. One, we have requested the information. In fact, we have a new request that our council helped us to draft that we're forwarding over to New Britain Transportation. It's one thing to ask someone for the information. It's another thing to get it back. Because on the other side, they're saying, well, we don't believe we have to give you X and Y. We only have to give you Z. So again, it's this negotiation back and forth, and literally we keep trying and working really hard to get the information that they're required. And I'm using air quotes. You can't see me, but that they're required to give us. But
Sure.
The language in the executive order isn't as specific as it could be, as we would like it to be. But nonetheless, we're continuing to pursue that. Why the town attorney isn't involved, I can't answer that question. I do know that anything under the Board of Education umbrella, we use our legal counsel for. We use Shipman and Goodwin for negotiating all of our contracts, whether they're certified contracts, non-certified contracts. They help us with the transportation contracts, et cetera. And then we have a different firm, Chinny and Muser, that assists us with special education.
Okay.
Just for reference, I do see under 7R where it says that the requires the contracted company to attest to and provide reasonable documentation of the fact that it is only charging actual and reasonable costs of sustaining wage and health insurance for active employees and or fleet while engaging best efforts to avoid unnecessary costs. So for them to prove that they're not incurring unnecessary costs, they should be providing that information quite promptly. I had another question that was asked of me by someone, and that has to do with the comment that you made that we may incur additional special ed costs for extended services for this. And someone had mentioned to me that the PPT plans for not providing services to the special education people should be modified, and they're receiving savings from the lack of the provided services.
That's interesting because it's actually not true, but that's a different issue. And we're hearing a lot of feedback. So I heard, I think 90% of what you said. All of the services that are being provided to students, regardless of whether they're students who receive services under an individual education plan or not, all of those services are being provided via the distance learning plan and via direct contact. And I believe our special education teachers in particular have been particularly active in trying to reach out to parents of students with special needs. And I think they're doing a really great job under extremely difficult circumstances. In addition to that, we also have what are called related services. That's occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, school psychology, social work, all of that. All of those employees are continuing to be paid under the governor's executive order. So there's no savings because we're not saving dollars. We're paying all of those folks for their full salaries. You know, again, according to what the governor's executive order indicates. And in addition to that, everyone is really working very, very hard in order to try to meet the needs of all of these students out there and engage with parents in a meaningful way. That being said, the process of providing for students who have disabilities and who have individual education plans is extremely difficult under these circumstances. We don't have these students in school with us face to face. It's extremely difficult for special education teachers to provide what students need, even though they're trying really hard to do that. It's extremely difficult for physical therapists, occupational therapists, you know, et cetera, to do that. And they're doing the very, very best that they can through the distance learning. We're using Google Meets, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There is absolutely no savings to be gleaned through that. Now, my comment about providing additional services, I will tell you that there is no question in my mind that once we're back in school, if we are back in school, quite honestly, at some point in time in the not too distant future, at the very least at the end of August and in September, we're going to find students who have special needs, who have not been able to progress as their non-disabled peers have been able to progress. We're going to need to assess where those students are. Let's say it's September. We're going to need to assess where those students are in September versus where they were on March 13th, where they last left us. And there's no question in my mind that we're going to need to provide compensatory education services, excuse me, which is a term of art in the legal profession, but is clearly indicates services that students need in order to catch up, if you will. We're going to need to provide those services in some way, shape, or form, whether that's through additional hours during the course of the week, whether that's through extended day services, et cetera. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to need to do that. And we all know right now that special education services are expensive. There's no two ways around that. And Jim, I'm telling you this, I spent 17 years as a director of special education, and I've spent an additional 15 years, almost 16 years as a superintendent of schools. That's exactly what we're going to have to do, and we're going to need to provide for that because it's clearly not something we anticipated. No one anticipated this happening. There's no additional dollars in the 2021 budget for that. So we're going to need a plan for that and hopefully use some perhaps of what we have maybe as an unexpended balance to do that. That's hopefully a one-time service because I hope none of us experiences this again in our lifetime, or, you know, certainly not next year with a, you know, reoccurrence of this particular situation with the virus. But
yes, can I say that I'm in total agreement with everything you said. And by the way, I am a director of the ARC in Southington. And so I'm very well aware of the needs of the special ed people.
Jim, I'm going to stop you right there. I know that you want to get in, but Sherry Dinello is asking to get in and to respond a little bit. I'd like to give Sherry an opportunity to speak. I do want to just say that we still have to hear from the public on this budget, and John has to still close. So I'm going to ask Sherry. Are you online, Sherry? Yeah. Okay. Sherry, go ahead. And
I just wanted to
please, everyone,
clarify that I know that
hang on
Mr.
just 1
Cannellan.
second, Sherry. Please, everyone, close your phone, mute your phones, please. There's a lot of feedback and there's a lot of people waiting to speak. So please just, we will put you up. Just mute it for right now, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Sherry.
I just wanted to clarify, and I know that Mr. Cannellan is explaining to you the fact that we've been negotiating back and forth, but I just wanted to clarify that the negotiations doesn't just mean that we're trying to come to a specific percentage. A lot of the negotiations has been actually in regards to them supplying the information that we need based on the governor's order. So we want to make sure that when the auditors come in next fall, looking at our overall budget and our expenditure for transportation, that in fact we have the attestations that are required by the executive order for what we decide to, what we negotiate in the end to pay, and that they provided the information in regards to making their employees whole, having them on their payroll. And one of the biggest issues in regards to the transportation contract, and I think the reason why the governor is looking out for them, is unfortunately there is a huge bus driver shortage in the state of Connecticut. And the fear is that if individuals were on unemployment, that they in fact, or they may get another job with the trucking industry because there's a shortage of truck drivers, as you know. And if school was to reopen, he wanted to ensure that the drivers would be available to come back to work. And that's one of the reasons why he wanted districts to be paying the transportation contracts to make sure individuals stayed on their payroll. So I just wanted to clarify that a lot of
the bus companies, the bus companies are not paying the employees. They're all laid off and they're collecting unemployment. And so again, I think the legalese is very clear. And the legalese says that we're responsible to pay for the cost to keep that business operational and ready, but not to pay all the expenses that they had during normal operations. And far from normal operations.
Okay, thank you, John. Right now, I think I'm on, right, Paul? I think you got me going here. Very good. I really want John to finish his budget, and then we're going to open it up for public communication. John.
Chairwoman Triano. Just to conclude, I just want to remind everybody that we do have the town of Southington employs 1,330 full-time equivalents. It's roughly 1,600 people work for the town, but when you do it in full-time equivalents, the equivalent of one full-time employee, it's 1,330. Just keep in mind when we do budgeting that the majority of these people are under contract. They're in one of the several bargaining units we deal with. And the ones who are not in a bargaining unit kind of ride with the bargaining unit closest to them, closest to their function. So in these bargaining units, we're looking at a 2.5%, 2.25% salary increase. So just remember that that has to be, that we're contractually obligated to fund that. Last point, debt is at, right now our debt is at $112.8 billion. We should know the outstanding 92, and the amount of interest that we'll eventually pay is 20, just so people could have some sense of how much debt we are carrying. It's well below the limit. I did find the answer to Councilman Palmieri's question on the fund balance, and I want to read that. The town shall strive to maintain during the year, and specifically at fiscal year end, a level of general fund unassigned fund balance, also known as accumulated surplus or the rainy day fund, at 10% of actual general fund revenues. So 10% shall be known as the town's floor. As of June 30th, 2019, the town had 16.1% unassigned fund balance. And just to give you an idea, so the floor is 10, we were at 16.1, and that's what allows us to take some above the 10 out to purchase municipal center or to return back for capital. So that's the number there. Last point on this, then we'll get to the recommendation and end. Just some risk factors to keep in mind. The timing of the return to a normal state from the COVID-19 and the cost associated with each week of delays, we have to keep that in mind. That could impact the budget. It's a risk to the budget we're handling. The long-standing 2.1% or 2.6 million budgeted taxes uncollectible may increase. Every year when we levy taxes, we add an extra 2.1% on it, or roughly, in our case this year, about 2.6 million. We tax 2.6 million more than we need because we know that 2.6 million will be uncollectible. So in order to get the taxes we need, we have to tax higher to get what we need because we know we're not going to get some. The amount that, and usually that's because people are challenging an assessment. It's not because of a financial hardship or an inability to pay. That's more minimal. It's something was misassessed or it should have been tax exempt and it's on the grand list and all that gets sorted out in appeals. But right now we may face as a risk people, businesses, taxpayers who have an inability to pay. So that 2.1 number we've been using may be too low, and that may come back and get us. A potential slowing in economic development may reduce the grand list growth in the future, and our newly generated taxes may go down. And then just the cost of the tax payment deferment program. If people don't pay their tax in July and they pay it a few months out, there's always a cost to that. So just some risk factors to keep in mind as you put forth a budget. I know we're trying to stay as low to zero as we can. We're at 0.42% is the recommendation, and that recommendation is $300,000 market value property. So let's just take a house. If a house is worth $300,000 market value, that property owner would see a $27 increase in annual property taxes, 27 for the whole year. Doing that, for 2% tax increase will raise for the town about $540,000. There's some rounding in here. That's what we're going to bring in from the tax increase that's currently being proposed to you. And again, that was proposed in a 4-2 bipartisan. 2 Democrat, 2 Republican voted in favor, 2 Republicans voted against, and that's the recommendation. So with that, I'll just take any questions and prepare to close.
Thank you.
Vicky's muted.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. What I would like to do, however, I would like to open it up if there's any public communication. Now, public questions on this thing. So those who wish to speak, I would ask you to keep your questions to a minimum. And but Paul Chaplinsky is going to help us with this. So if you are on the phone, Paul, please, when Paul recognizes you, please state your name, and then you can ask your question. Okay, Paul, is that right?
Yes, Victoria, it's difficult for me we have to unmute everybody because they have no ability to speak unless I unmute them. So I'm unmuting everybody who's a call-in is now unmuted. I ask you to please mute your own phone if you have no intention of talking. And those who would like to make a comment, please go ahead.
Is there anyone who wishes?
I would like to make a comment. I guess I'll go first.
Go ahead.
It's Anne Marie Conity, 1237 Mount Vernon Road. First of all, to speak to some of Jim's points to Mr. Connellan, I have a memo from New Britain Transportation. I'm not a lawyer, but I read the executive order, and they have representation from one of the biggest attorney groups around, and it's pretty clear. They're supposed to be negotiating in good faith, and I've sat for negotiations. It's pretty clear, the executive order, that they're only supposed to be paying for employees that are working in their health benefits. My husband drives for New Britain Transportation. The employees are collecting unemployment. And most of the employees that get the health insurance and are full-time employees are also laid off and collecting unemployment. They're not being paid right now. They all received a memo recently from New Britain Transportation. I'm just going to read a little part of it. At this time, New Britain Transportation is in discussion with the Board of Education. More information will follow as this process moves forward. We are hoping that we are successful in these discussions so that New Britain Transportation will be able to begin paying its employees through this challenging time. So right there, They're not paying its employees right now through this challenging time. So there's some real savings to be seen right there. So maybe Mr. Cannellan was not aware of that, but I have it in black and white right here. And that's been going on since March 16th. There's only one full-time employee and that's Katie. You could probably get all the information you need from her. So that's to clarify that. The other thing on the special education costs, I understand where Mr. Cannellan is coming from, but the executive order says you can negotiate in good faith the hourly. I don't know if the occupational and physical therapists are hourly, but since they can't have the hands-on during this pandemic, wouldn't it be more cost-effective, since he thinks they're going to need more of this afterward, if it's hourly, to be able to negotiate that part? The only thing that goes with that he said Mr. Morelli was incorrect, and it's on page 4 of the questions that came from Shipman and Goodman to him in the memo that he gave you people, is that if you renegotiated those hourly costs, you would have to do the individual PPTs for the special education students that it affected. So that's another thing. Special education costs are very expensive. They are one of the most expensive costs of our Board of Education. So shouldn't we get the most bang for the dollar there if those are hourly costs, and we maybe are going to have to pay more of the compensatory later on? And he's hoping for no more of an outbreak, but Dr. Fossey, who we all know is very reputable, says we're definitely going to have another outbreak during flu season. And let's God hope we have something that can combat this and that's not going to kill as many people and keep everything closed down. Another thing that I've noticed is in some of the correspondence, it's implied that the Board of Ed is expecting federal reimbursement for some of their costs. If they were to get, I know we can't ask them for a line item budget, it's against the law. But if they were to receive federal reimbursement for some of their costs that are in this year's budget, can we as the town, since the taxpayers have given them that money, ask them for that federal reimbursement? Because technically they'd be double dipping at that point. That's another point I wanted to make. And then with New Britain Transportation, are you aware that when you're laid off, you don't necessarily have to rehire a laid-off employee? If you furlough an employee, you have to rehire them. Then you can lay them off or fire them. So they can't even use that as an argument to get the money. Yes, they do want to keep their drivers, but I know many of the bus drivers that have quit there to go work for other people, and a week later they're asking for their bus driver jobs back. It's not so easy to use your CDL to work for other companies. It's a much different thing driving a bus. And I know that firsthand experience. My husband's been driving for 5 years as a retiree. The other thing, and I'm glad Mr. Leary said this, with this pandemic, can we really expect the taxes from the individuals coming in like they're going to? And it's a minimal tax increase that they're proposing, but $27, I've said $25 is a lot for the seniors in normal times because they choose between their medicine, their heating, their groceries. $27 now for some of these people, they can't even put food on their table. They're standing in lines to get food. You think just because we snap our finger and open the state, they're going to have access to that money now, and they're going to be able to come up with $27 more to pay their taxes? They're not going to worry about their town taxes first. They're going to worry about putting food on their table for their kids. I'm just concerned first about let's being realistic in this pandemic. Now, I read your article about maybe deferring the library. I think that's using real good common sense. I mean, we can't, I know you want to bond it, but we're probably looking at 2 years to take care of this pandemic before a vaccine, if a vaccine is ever taken care of. And the economy is not just going to bounce back. Any normal, smart person would know that. So let's not put our rose-colored glasses on and not think realistically in this. and I'm thinking for the young people. I mean, I'm fortunate. I sit here and I have tears in my eyes watching these people standing in line. I feel fortunate that I'm getting my Social Security. The young people are never going to be able to retire. But if these young people don't start thinking realistically and looking at things not through rose-colored glasses, then you're going to bury yourselves even more. And I just feel for everybody. We got I'm making a prediction. We got 2 years of hard times ahead of us. And yeah, they're trying to keep the interest rates down to stop a depression. But when things start, we could see a depression worse than 1929. And I hope we don't. But we just had a New York emergency room doctor commit suicide. The healthcare profession is going to go through stuff like they've never seen. Stuff they've seen now, it's the first responders, it's going to take years for them to get over what they've seen. So I don't think the Board of Ed wants an increase, but I think it's time for them to stop living in their little fiefdom too. I think for the first time, we have to say 0. You got to tighten your belts. You got to look and stop looking just in your little world and look at the whole world and say, okay, we got to tighten our belts like everybody else too. We got to start learning to do more with 0. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Thank you. Anybody, Paul?
Nobody else. Let me, there was a couple background noise. I'm going to unlock a couple of the phones again. Is there anybody else that's on the phone that would like to speak?
Okay, well,
I'm going to mute all the phones.
Okay, we're going to read them. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right. I think we have, Chris, you wanted to ask a question. Is that correct?
Yes, if that's okay.
Sure.
It's for Mark Shoda.
Okay, Mark, are you on?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
So we talked a lot with all the closures for the Board of Education. Mark, is there any, I obviously don't anticipate a large amount, but is there any savings on the town side due to the closures with Town Hall and the municipal employees?
From a savings standpoint, our biggest savings is going to be from the winter for us. Obviously, our when it comes to small savings for possible utilities, there is going to be that, but most of our savings will be because of the winter. We have approximately, I believe it's $160,000 out of snow and ice that won't be used. And obviously, you know how the procedure works. We sit down with every department head and we figure out what the resources they're not going to need in this fiscal year. We go over it. In fact, Amelia and I have been doing that for the last 2 weeks, go over with department head, and we put that money into numbers, which we go in front of the Board of Finance and you with, and that's how we do our budget reallocation. So at this point, we've met with the department heads. So the biggest savings that we saw, not necessarily from the virus, but from the winter, was snow and ice. We've used approximately $160,000 less than we budgeted.
So just to follow up, so just for example, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to clarify with you. So, for example, overtime at the transfer station, I believe we're covering that now by offering it during the week to make up for the time lost. Is that correct, or is there any other savings? And that's just one example.
There may be some smaller savings on that part of it. We may be talking a few thousand here or there because we normally have 5 guys at the transfer station, and we were closed for, I believe it was 6 or 5 Saturdays. So the 4 weekdays that we're going to pick up will close that gap a little bit. So there should be a little bit less, but I'm anticipating that the next couple of Saturdays I may have to put another guy on instead of 5. I may have to put 6 on because, as you know, I was there on Saturday. it was pretty crowded. So in this particular case, will there be savings from overtime? It's possible, but it's certainly nothing that's going to rock the boat. That's for sure.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anything else, Chris?
No, thank you. Thank you.
We're gonna close this down. Val, you had a question for John, and I think that'll probably be the close of the public hearing.
John, I just wanted to say it's my first budget, and so your presentation really is very clear cut. It really helps me to understand the budget process, and I just wanted to thank you and your committee and the Board of Finance. I had a question about the state grants. Do you feel pretty comfortable, given the virus, as far as those funds being available?
No. To be honest, I mean, that's what we know. That's the information we know at the time we make the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
But with state grants, when the state gets squeezed, they can do one of two things. They can cut back. They can do three things. They can leave them alone and figure it out, or they can cut them, or they can send down another expense. And over the past 5 years, we've been in all those situations. The threat of them, the reality of them, we prepared for them, we didn't get them, we can go back and forth. But one time they wanted to push down a portion of teacher retirement. They wanted, wanted to withhold grants. So we've seen everything and we don't know. And I think we should ask Mark Schoda as well as the comfort level of those grants also. If he has anything to add. As time goes on, we know more, but they're budgeted numbers.
It's a moving target, right?
I think the couple of things. The as you know, we're in the second year of a biannual budget. The legislature ends May the 6th. So anything that would take place outside of what the numbers we already gave you, we gave you the governor's numbers, which is the second year of the budget. So I'm confident certainly about ECS because that would take much more than just the governor slashing. What I'm not so confident about is, as John Larry mentioned, and we've suffered this before, is possible mid-year cuts when it comes to things like town aid roads, LoSiP, things like that, because ECS is legislative run more than the governor. So I think the biggest grant we get is ECS. So I'm more confident on that one since it would take some sort of action outside of the governor. So I'm confident there. Not as confident, just like John Larry is not as confident that if we get squeezed, it'll be the other grants.
Right. Thank you, everybody. I want to just make a closing comment. We're going to close this down. The words of Anne Marie today are words that we've all heard all over town. And whether you're whether we're on one side or the other, whether we're Republican or Democrat, I'm sure all of us have felt the same compulsion. I know that Minority Chair Palmieri and myself have had a discussion how we can bring the budget down to a zero increase. So that's our hope. How that goes about may differ philosophically, but that is our hope. And we thank the Board of Finance for working very hard. It's been a long process for them, and their work has been duly noted by everyone. So, John, please extend our grateful thanks to your entire board, to Mr. Cannellan and the Board of Education, we thank you. And of course, Mark, Schoda, and Amelia, we thank you. So that will close our public hearing, and we are ready now to go into our regular meeting. And we're going to order pizza at 6 o'clock, at 10 o'clock. So just to let you know. No, I'm only kidding. We'll move along. All right. It is now 8:25 by my clock, and I am going to open up a regular public meeting. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Please
Yes,
unmute your
James
microphones.
James Morelli,
Here.
Christopher Palmieri,
Here.
Christopher Poulos,
Here.
Paul Chaplinsky,
Here.
Michael Del Santo,
Present.
Valerie DiPaolo, here, William Dietzick, Tom Lombardi,
Here.
Victoria Triano.
Here, would you please take a moment as we salute our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. You may be seated. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
Chris made a motion. Is there a
Second from Paul.
Paul made a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or corrections? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Thank you. I want to go into Councilmatic Communications right now. On the phone, we have Shane Lockwood. And so Shane, can you please bring us up to date with the virus and our situation in this community?
Madam Chair, Mr. Lockwood might be one of the people that I've muted. So what I'm going to do is, if you don't mind, Shane, let me unmute everybody who's on the phone. We'll figure out which one you are, and then we'll mute everybody. We will mute everyone except you. So give me 1 second here.
Okay.
I'm going to unmute all the call-in users. Please don't talk, obviously, unless your name is Shane Lockwood.
Paul, this is Shane.
Shane, which one are you?
I'm right here. Area code 203, if it's by number.
Are you still there? Okay, Shane, are you there now?
I am.
Okay, I think you're number 6. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and give an update. Right now, throughout the state, what we're seeing is almost a plateau of cases and hospitalization, which is what we expected throughout all of this. So it shows that our social distancing is working. Unfortunately, what we're seeing also is an increase in deaths. A lot of them are people 75 years or older, and this is pretty consistent throughout the state right now. So just as I ask that, as you have a moment throughout your day, take a moment and just think of all the victims and their loved ones as we go through this. One thing I want to address is the governor has ordered through an executive order that people wear face coverings when in public. This includes when going into stores. Just want to remind people that stores are private property and can deny entry if you're not wearing a covering. So please wear them. On our website, through the town website, through CDC, there's information on how to make it. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be a scarf. It could be a lot of different things. So there's plenty of information out there on face coverings. I also want to thank the Chief Daly and Officer Bearbault of the police department. Through executive orders, they're actually enforced by the police department. And every day, myself and Officer Bearbault probably get a couple complaints regarding this. For the most part, they're all investigated, and I would say probably 75 to 80% are unfounded. When we do have an issue, we provide education through police and health for people on how to do things the right way. And we haven't run into any issue. People are complying, especially once we're able to provide them information. We've also been working close with the police department to put up signs. If you walk on the trail at all, you see our social distancing signs. We've also been putting them up at Crescent Lake. Officer Bearbault's also been delivering supplies that we get from the state and getting them out to nursing homes, first responder agencies, and medical offices. I believe social distancing is working. Dave LaPrey from the rec department every day is checking the trail, the parks, Crescent Lake. We've had a few issues with overcrowding once the weather gets nice, but through education, through some no parking signs and other signage, I think we have a good handle on that. One thing I want to remind people, a lot of people are struggling with social isolation right now. There's many resources out there, many different agencies you can call. The easiest way to find those agencies right now is to call 211, and they'll put you in touch with the appropriate party. So again, there's resources there. If you're struggling with social isolation, take advantage of what we have out there. And I just want to conclude with check the Town of Southington website, southington.org, the Plainville Southington Health District, pshd.org, ct.gov, and cdc.gov for the latest, the truest information, tips on how to protect yourself, family, things like face covering, and the latest statistics. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions from the council if there are any.
If council members have questions, Victoria, everybody's on mute. So please unmute yourself if you have a question, including you, Madam Chair.
Doing it now. Anyone have a question for Shane? These are difficult times, and I believe that this is the most difficult time, because we realize how rough it's going to be. I think it's a very important point that Shane made about the fact that social isolation is very, very serious. And our hearts go out to all of the members in this community with heartfelt sympathy and concern. And please reach out to someone, to everybody in this community. Reach out to folks. Let them know how you're doing, and let's stay connected by all means, please. Thank you, Shane. If there's no other questions for Shane, then I would like at this point in time, Paul, you had asked for an update on Blatchley. And so we have Mr. Grappone, who's going to give us a heads up on that. So could you please do that, please, Jim, and bring us up to date on the Blatchley property?
Sure. Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Jim Grappone. Also, I think on the line is Keith Hayden, just in case there's any questions. We've been working with the developer, Hillcrest Development, ever since this issue arose. There's been several meetings with Mark Schota, the town manager, and Mel Hobson, also, who's been at the meeting, who hired a third-party engineer, Andrew Quirk of Kratzer and Jones. So we've been all working together to resolve this issue. Most recently, and I think on the last update that you may have seen in your packet, the outlet control structure work was completed. There's been at least 3 rainstorms, December 15th, January 25th, and most recently is April 13th, some substantial rainstorms that we feel the corrective work has been done. And that corrective work, there was a total of 3 orifices in the outlet control structure. We had the developer seal 2 of the 3, which is the higher flow orifices, which allows more runoff to be stored in the pond before releasing it. So that seems to have worked. In the update, it's mentioned that there's still some grading that needs to be done around the pond, and formalization of a spillway made of riprap needs to be done also. I've been in contact with the developer who is aware of that, who is going to schedule that work. That's been out there for about a month, but the weather really hasn't been cooperative. But Liz Vernon knows that the work is going to be completed, and she's going to schedule that. So with that in mind, and I think Mel's on the line also, she can update, but I believe Mel is getting prices from local contractors on her portion of the drainage improvements on her property. She's gotten 2 quotes. The first one was kind of on the high side, but the most recent one has come in a little bit more in line with what we feel the costing should be. So I don't know if Mel wants to comment any further on that, but that's just a quick update of where we're at.
Thank you, Jim. I know Mel is on the phone. I see her. I'm not sure You know what, Paul, maybe if we could,
I'll unmute all the lines so we can find out. And maybe if both Mel and Keith Hayden can identify themselves, because I think Keith is also a call-in user. So hold on one second. Let me unmute all the lines here.
I think I'm caller number two.
Which one, Mel?
I'm here too. You can hear me.
yes, we can, Keith.
Before Keith, we go. Keith, can you identify yourself again, Keith?
Can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear us? Keith, give me a check one more time.
Okay, here I am.
All right, Keith. And how about Mel? Are you on the line, Mel?
I think I'm number two.
Okay, Mel, hold on. Let me see if I can find you there. No, I don't see number two. Go ahead, though. Mel, if you had some comments.
Hi, Mel Hobson, 115 Blatchley Avenue. I just want to thank Jim for the report and Keith and Mark for the follow-up. I think that's accurate to date, and I look forward to working with folks to get the issue resolved.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Keith. Did you want to add anything to this?
I'm sorry, were you talking to me?
Keith, I asked if you wanted to add anything to this.
I think Jim summed it up pretty well. The town is going to also have to install a catch basin in Blatchley, which we will coordinate with Mel when those improvements are done to the drainage in her property. So we know we have to do that. We'll just coordinate that work with her.
Okay, very well, good. All right, any other questions on this property? Paul, do you have anything else you want to add?
I do, yeah. I was raising my hand. I have a question. I guess my question really is, what's the end game here? I read through all of the reports, and from what I can see from the residents agent that did the design work, it sounds like, well, we heard from Jim, we heard you say that there's been 3 rainstorms. I would say the most substantial rainstorm was only last week. And I think the most substantial improvement was really last month when the outlets were done in the month of beginning of April, end of March, maybe. I forget when it was. But my understanding is that the water coming off the site that's causing the problem is the development that's up to the east, and that development work, the new outflow of the detention pond. Well, number one, it looks like the water's still quite dirty, so the riprap needs to be fixed because they're polluting the area below them. But the second thing is, the report from the engineering firm says that the changes now that would affect the resident down, Miss Hobson down below, are good for a 10-year flood. And for me, I don't know, a 10-year flood is still not insurance enough to protect this resident from work that was done on a development when the situation was caused purely from the development that was above her. So I guess my question is, what is our intention to work with the resident? Are we trying to get them to a 10-year flood situation, a 20-year flood situation, a 50-year flood situation, a 100-year flood situation? I'd like to know that, because I still don't feel comfortable. I got to tell you, I took a drive a month ago through that development at Hillcrest, and the erosion and sediment control there is an atrocity right now. I mean, they are polluting the wetlands all around them with sand and silt that's coming off of many different lots, including stuff that's coming out of this detention basin. And I think we really need to have a strong discussion with this developer whatever bonding is left, I would pull the bonding on that and I would fix this at least to a longer flood period. My personal opinion is we have to make the, like in a few years, because we get a 10-year flood, we shouldn't have to deal with this issue again. This poor resident I see has berms all around their yard because of the problems that are occurring. So I'd like to know what is the end state that we plan to get this resident's property to, and what is the expectation for funding it?
Okay.
Who's going to answer those questions? That's what I'd like to know.
Well,
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Yeah, the chair would like it, but
Who's speaking?
this is Jim Grappone. I could start and Keith could follow up if you'd like.
Okay.
I'll be brief. I know Paul brought up a couple issues. The first is siltation and with the erosion, which has been, so there's been some issues on that. The disturbance, there's a lot of disturbance out there. The developer has done the development in phases. However, I don't know the exact acreage of each phase, but as he gets and builds homes, there's a time period, as you know, before he gets a lawn put in and the driveway's paved. So that is raw land that's up there. We've constantly go up there and they do sweep the streets, and they do put in the lawns as quickly as they can. The soil that's up there, we've tried to work with the developer. In solution, it does not settle out for some reason. That material that's up there is very erodible, and it's very turbid water. So I don't know if it's the nature of the soils up there, because it was at one time, a farmland. So that's the first issue. Yes, we would agree that there's a siltation issue. Dave LaValle, planning and engineering, we're on them constantly about sweeping the street and putting vegetation down on those raw surfaces. As far as the development, I think, Paul, you were here when the development got approved. I know Councilman Del Santos was. As you recall, this was a court settlement. There was a lot more units that were approved than were actually settled in court. And what we look at is the runoff at the property line. That's the way the planning regulations state that they have to look at up to a 25-year storm event at the property line. The developer, his engineer went through drainage calculations, submitted it to the town for review. We agreed with those calculations. The real issue is the size of the pipe that's on Ms. Hobson's property. It predates, I think it's 1950. It's a 12-inch pipe. We have at least a 24-inch going into the pond. And it's throttled down by an 8-inch orifice on the bottom. But as soon as the flows get higher, it's basically flipping a switch from going from an 8-inch pipe full to a 24-inch pipe full. It's that quick. So the developer had met the regulations. But I really think the real issue is the capacity of the pipe downstream.
But the capacity of the pipe downstream did exist prior to the development, right? And that pipe looks like it's been there before I was born.
Since
The pipe was put in 1951, but the pipe was put in with no calculations, and it was basically just evidently there was some type of drainage across that property. So before the developer developed the land, he put a pipe across and tied it into the town drainage. Obviously, he didn't do any calculations, which is part of the problem now. Had he done that and properly sized it, we might be having a different conversation. But
Keith, I'm sorry, just to clarify your comment, are you talking about if they had sized the pipe in 1951?
yes.
How would they know that there was going to be a development up on the hill that was going to funnel all of the runoff in a concentrated manner into this one parcel to properly size it? How would they have known that?
Madam Chair, this is Mark Schroeder. Can I step in for a second, please? Madam Chair.
Yes, Mark?
Okay, I understand all these questions, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, and I know Paul has these questions. What I'm trying to do, and what we've been trying to do for months, is work with the property owner at this point. Working with the property owner, working with the developer, and getting the best of a situation, which none of us is happy with. So yes, the town is working with the property owner, and yes, the town is working with the developer. At this point, I mean, we could go crazy as to what we're going to talk about the pipe sizing, et cetera, and I understand where everybody wants to go. I can't think that way. I got to think on behalf of the town of Southington and the property owner, the developer. We got to move forward. That's why Mel was good enough to have a third-party engineer in. I got two of the top engineers in the area working for me, working on this project. So in this particular case, we've gone, in my opinion, we've gone pretty far with the developer, and now we'll work closely with the engineer that Mel has. And as Jim already mentioned, the town is already committed to putting a drainage basin in and an extension of a 24-foot pipe, or whatever the inch pipe is, I'm sorry, but a distance of about 25 feet. So at this point, and we could talk about how we got to this point, that's all well and good, but I think that's a planning and zoning issue, which is beyond us. My job is to get it from here to correction. And when asked about financials and all that, we have the quotes. Mel has the quotes for the property that's being done on, or the work that's being done on her property. I already have my highway crew ready to work with her contractor. So that's where we currently are. I think we have a very good relationship with Mel, the property owner. We stay in contact constantly. So, I mean, at this point, we can re-argue what got applied for, what did the Planning and Zoning Commission do? But I think at this point, I think we move forward. So I understand where he's coming from.
Can I ask a question, Mark? Then let me just, so what is the town's intention with respect to the landowner having to fund some or all parts of, what's the intention? Because, you know, I situation and I go, a development that was not there prior to when this person bought their property 40 years ago or 30 years ago has now created a burden on their property, whether it's town's liability, the developer's liability. It certainly doesn't seem that it's the resident downstream's liability. So my question is, what is the town's intention to fund this project? And do we as a council need to make a decision to make to have a one-time expense to help out in this situation, or what's the intention?
The intention is that working with her developer eventually, and we're going to be putting in our section of the pipe into the town road. It'd be outrageously inappropriate for us to discuss what we think might be a liability on the town, because number one is this, as Jim mentioned, if indeed the developer put the development in based upon the regulations, and the regulations are correct, and the flow is correct, then there isn't a liability situation. All that being said is, that's an inappropriate discussion to have at this moment. That would be with the town attorney executive session if you wish to have that conversation. I'm trying to say, can we move forward with this? And timing is not on anyone's side here. So I agree with Mel 100%. We're all working well together, and to bring in an issue about whether the town has to pay thousands upon thousands of dollars on a private property when a development comes in that meets the regulations, I think is a dangerous precedent to set. And I've made that perfectly clear to the property owner. What we're willing to do is we're willing to work in that 25-foot area, put the basins in, and put the pipe in. And I think that's where we currently are.
I'm just going to go on the record, Madam Chair. I don't know where the liability lies, and I don't mean to say that the town's liable, but clearly there's an issue that needs to be rectified, and the resident should not have to pay $15,000, $20,000 out of their pocket because, you know, a developer made miscalculations or misrepresented to the town or whatever the situation is. So I definitely would like to follow this as it progresses and have this matter followed by the council, please.
I think perhaps our next step would be to set up an executive session, because this is a matter of property. And I think we need to hear from the town attorney on this for further discussion. So I'm going to close the conversation down at this point, and then either for an executive session on this and further discussion on it, because I understand, but we do need to come to a conclusion. We can't continue the discussion at this point in time, Mel. I want you to understand. But the conversation will continue, Mr. Chaplinsky. I think it's an important conversation. Thank you, Mark, also. All right, we're going to move on. Is that all right with everybody?
Sure. Madam Chair, I have a council matter communication. It's Mike Del Santo.
Please. Yep. Michael, go
Okay,
ahead.
couple of things about the transfer station. As Mark mentioned earlier, this past Saturday, I want to commend town staff. They did a wonderful job. It was busy all day long. I want to thank the residents. They exerted some patience and some understanding. I want to thank the Southington Police Department. I drove by a couple times. Looks like traffic was under control. I think residents were very respectful to the Old Turnpike Road and all the way down to Mulberry Street residents. So we are hoping this Wednesday and Thursday, the transfer station is going to be open for all services from 3:30 until 6:30. So if folks have the time, please go down there on those evenings to try to alleviate some of the crowds that we anticipate again for next Saturday. But great job. Next couple of weeks, it'll be open Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then we'll reassess after Saturday, May 9th. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to mention is please continue to support local businesses that are open during this horrific time. By gift cards, by, set future appointments, eat like me, go to our restaurants, support our grocery stores, support our service industry people, be polite, be nice. Businesses in town need to know that we're behind them, 100%. And when this thing is over, we are going to continue to support you. That is it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I see that Mr. Poulos has a comment on the transfer station.
That was actually me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Please.
That's okay. I used the transfer station personally the last 2 Saturdays. The 2 Saturdays ago, I needed it for brush, and I want to compliment them because not only did they maintain social distancing through their operations, but they actually had laid everything out with cones, with caution tape to denote, obviously you're outside, but to denote exactly where each vehicle should pull in. So really, I think their planning and preparation before that brush drop off, that first reopen, probably made things easier for this past Saturday. So huge shout out to them. This past Saturday, I was there for a mixed items to dispose of, and again, the line was a little, a little bit longer than normal, which is to be expected because of the closures. But again, not only did they do a phenomenal job, but the police department were out there managing everything, and really just want to give them a shout out as well.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Paul Chaplinsky, you have a comment?
Right. Yep. Thanks, Madam Chair. I have 3 items for Councilmatic. First of all, I want to recognize Amelia and the great work that she did helping us in very short order set up a donation button on our Southington Community Services website. This was done about a month ago, and I received a card in the mail from Amelia, just thanking us from Janet at Community Services, just thanking us for making the suggestion to add the button. So I wanted to just thank Amelia for getting that done in short order. Janet reports that from April 1st to April 18th, by adding the button on the site, Southington Community Services received $3,284 just in that 2-week time period. So a really great shout out to staff, Amelia, for doing that, and for those in the community who are supporting community services. That's really great.
Madam Chair, Mike Del Santo, real quick. Paul is not going to say it, so I'm going to say it. If it wasn't for Paul was very instrumental in having that button put on. Great job, Paul. That's it.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that.
Go ahead, Paul.
All right. Second one is I wanted to say that Mark Ramsey had a great visit from WTNH today on the LEAF program, and he's look tomorrow morning on Channel 8 for information about how Mark and the LEAF program is helping the those who are in need of food. So those who are insecure in food through the CSA program. So look for that. But it's really nice to see today on Facebook, see Mark and the LEAF program being highlighted.
That's great.
And then the last item was that we Mike and I worked on the video for this week's council communications. I hope we represented everybody well. We tried to capture the information that was discussed with respect to masks and some other items as well, in a way that we tried to reach out to the community on behalf of the entire council, and hopefully we did you guys proud there.
Great job. Chris Poulos, you did have a council matter communication. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick items. I forgot to mention at our last meeting that there are 4 of our public school teachers in the last month who successfully applied for and received over $18,000 of grants to fund their professional learning through Fund for Teachers fellowships. These teachers will travel in the summer of 2021. They'll engage in learning journeys, and then they'll come back, and this is my favorite part of it. They come back and they not only do they implement with their students, but they train other teachers in what they've learned. So they have a multiplying effect. They scale their learning. And this is at no cost. Like these teachers, and I bring this up yearly when this happens, are pioneers. They understand that we are confronted with tough budget times, and they go out and they think of a third way to get the important training that educators need. And their names, and I want their names recorded on the record, are Katie Soltis, Bethany Rosen, Heather Grover, and Lenore Butler. And these are teachers from 4 of our elementary and middle schools. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize just the ongoing hard work and effort of John DeMello and our Veterans Committee. We received communication from him today that during these especially challenging times, that committee is working through email and phones to help out our vets who are among some of the most impacted by the health challenges of our times. And they do not stop. John and his committee, they do not stop to help. We are so fortunate to have their service in our community to help our vets.
Absolutely, I agree. Thank you so much. Tom Lombardi, you had something.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Triano. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to not only everyone on this call for participating. I also want to give a shout out to the Planning and Zoning last week. They had a public hearing. They had over 100, or actually right around 100 participants take part in it. Rob Phillips did an excellent job in hosting the meeting, and Bob Hammersley, the chair. They just did a fantastic job. They learned this software that we're on now. And I bring that up because I think it's important that the town meetings need to continue to go on, and all boards and commissions. I think we're getting more comfortable as the weeks go on, and the town business needs to go forward. And I'll just end that a special thanks should be noted to Councilman Czaplinski for really stepping up, reaching out to both Jay Baker from the town, Rob Phillips, all of us, and really helping out. So, I hope that the media picks up on this and publicizes the fact that we are still holding meetings. We're still looking for public input. And this is a great way to do it. So I just want to make that clear to everyone.
Thanks, Tom. Paul, did you have something else? I saw you waving. I guess you were.
No, I was waving Tommy off. Just saying, stop. Thank
All
you.
right. Anybody else have any? I have 2 things that I really do want to get to. The first thing I wanted to say, the first Thursday in May is always the National Day of Prayer. And we in Southington have been doing this, my goodness, for over 25 years. When I first came on the council, my first council, I had heard about this, and I asked, could we do a Southington Day of Prayer? And the chairman at that time was wonderful and said yes. And so we started over 25 years ago, before the national organization of National Day of Prayer. Unfortunately, this year, because of the situation that we all face and the idea about watching us, being careful not to gather, taking care by loving one another, staying apart. We are not going to gather on the green for the National Day of Prayer. However, every day is a National Day of Prayer. So I would suggest to everybody who participates every year, the pastors, the church groups, the choirs that all come down and sing, and it's just wonderful that this year we still remember the National Day of Prayer, and it's in a more personal time. So I just wanted to make that announcement. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up is I want to announce something tonight, and that is that one of the things I've tried to do on the council as chair is to kind of put down all the political stuff and just let us try to focus on what's good for Southington. And we've done tremendous work here. The videos that are going out are wonderful. People all over town are remarking about them. So all of you members that are on the council that have been up front and going into the plunge of videotaping, I want to thank you. The rest of our council will be coming up. Val, you're up next, Val. So get ready. And but I want to thank you all. It's been wonderful. Along with that same philosophy, I gave a call to Chris Palmieri, the majority leader, and I talked to him about the Distinguished Service Award. It's an idea that I have that there is so much going on in Southington. There are so many people doing the right thing, the good thing, the positive thing, that we need to recognize them as a council. And I wrote up the purpose, the criteria, and how someone can be nominated for this Distinguished Service Award. Let me just, if I can, I want to thank Chris because he's always very important to anything that is a member of the council. He's always been that way. I've had great respect for him. But we came up with the, what's that?
If I could just thank you. Thanks for reaching out and working together with you is phenomenal. And I want to thank you for your leadership with this.
Oh, thank you. Oh, my goodness. All right. So Distinguished Service Award. The purpose is to recognize and distinguish outstanding acts of selfless service to Southington and her people during the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. It's focused right to this COVID-19 outbreak and people who are distinguishing themselves by outstanding acts of kindness. The criteria is this award will be given to businesses and private citizens who have shown remarkable care and concern for this community, as well as other communities. They could be living in Southington and doing something wonderful for other communities, for Southington and our people through direct service and unselfish giving to undergird the sick, the poor, and the most needy within our town. Nominations as of this day, and we're going to do a press release on this tomorrow, so all the papers will get this, including even the TV, but nominations may be made by any resident in Southington. They will be reviewed by us, the town council. And if meeting the criteria, an award will be given for this honor. Nominators should give reasons how this act of service has impacted those under the criteria, in other words, what they did and how it's impacted the town. A signed letter or email should be submitted to the office of the town manager, and you can get Mark Shoda's email address. It's shodam@southington.org. And you can do it through email, you can do it with a letter, but nominations are open as of right now. And we will be reviewing them as a council. So we may get an abundance of people who are doing great things. And you know what? I want to know about it. We want to know about it. We want to be able to honor them who are honoring our most needy, our sick, and our people who are fighting every day to put a meal on the table. People that have nowhere else to turn but to the benevolence of others, and we have an abundance of that. So the award is called the Distinguished Service Award. If you would like to know any other information about it, you can call the town manager's office at 860-276-6200. Lara is fully aware of this, and so we'll see those that are nominated. Members of the council can certainly nominate folks also. However, we are going to be acting as judges of this award, so I would suggest that maybe we hold our nominations to a minimum, but sometimes we have seen great acts and they should be honored. So if you have somebody, town council members, by all means, go ahead and put them in. We're all going to talk about them, and I think we're going to have a wonderful time presenting these honors. Folks, the members of the council will present these honors on behalf of the town of Southington. And I'm just very excited about this because it's a chance for, once again, to put politics aside and do what's right for our community. And all of us have been elected as leaders. And these are the kinds of things in which we can lead. So I want to thank all the members of the council. I don't know if you have any questions about it, council members. I know some of you are, maybe I'm just springing on you, but if you have any questions or comments, please make them known now, and we'll wing it starting tomorrow. We'll be ready to receive nominations. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, very good. I think that's the end of Councilmatic Communications. There's a lot of stuff going on tonight. I would like very much to go into special committees. Open Space, Paul, would you give us a report on Open Space, please?
Sure. Thanks, Madam Chair. As everybody knows, we adopted the Pleasant View property at the last meeting, so good news there. We talked about Mark Ramsey with Channel 8 tomorrow, so set your, do I still say DVRs or do I say VHSs or set your DVRs? You know, the Open Space Committee continues to look at maintenance, and we're still pursuing the goats. The goats can't be used until leaves are on the trees, so we see that hopefully sometime in May starting. We have a couple different folks who are looking at Novix and looking for other properties as well to use the goats. And we hope we're close to coming to some agreement on that parcel on how we're going to clean up the invasive species. We also discussed some disturbances at Novix and recognized that we are getting some calls there. Dave LaValle looked into cameras with a light pole. The committee reviewed the costs, and they were running anywhere from $6,000 for just a camera to, you know, $11,000-12,000 for a camera and a pole. And we decided to hold off because the Southington Police Department was also stepping up patrols when they were on that side of town and doing drive-bys more often on the Novix parking lot to ensure that, you know, they're monitoring the situation there. So we decided for a few months, we're going to monitor, you know, what the activity is there, how many complaints we get before we go and spend the money to put up either a light pole or a camera. And we also had a presentation from a gentleman who has expressed some interest in doing some small farming on the parcels. He expressed interest specifically on the Grosky parcel. We see that as a little bit of a longer term, you know, relationship if anything becomes of it. But you know, he's looking to do some startup there with a greenhouse and possibly you know, small animals, fruit trees, things like that. So the committee's kind of noodling over that before making any recommendations on that. My guess is that's a multi-month project to really decide, you know, what we want to see from there. Jim, Chris, any other items that you'd wanted to elaborate on there?
No, Paul, just to complement what you're saying. The gentleman for the Grosky proposal came forward last year to the Farm Heritage Committee, and at the time, we were very excited and very interested. So, but he couldn't pursue it at the time. So I'm really excited and anxious to hear about possibly doing something on that site. I think that would be phenomenal and a win for us.
The only, Jim, before I make one last comment, anything from your side?
I just wanted to say that I want everyone to know that we really haven't lost the traction, that we've been holding our meetings this way as well. And there's a lot of exciting things going on. And so, again, I want to reiterate that there's a lot of activity and things are moving in the right direction. So keep it up.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, the one thing I want to put on everybody's radar here, it's related more to farm heritage. You know, we all, I think, have been reached out to this last week about a proposal that's coming on the board for solar panels off of an East Street property, which is adjacent to the Johnson open space parcel. It's immediately adjacent to the open space parcel. There is a pending, I think there's going to be an application coming up for solar panels with the Siting Council. And, you know, that the parcel that's in question is owned by the Archdiocese, and they're looking to put a very large solar array there. We currently have a farmer in town who works with the Archdiocese on farming that parcel. And I wanted to go on the record that I have significant concern about the solar panels, the size of the array that's going there, it being under the utility lines, the impact on the neighbors, the impact on the wetlands, as well as the ecology there. I think I have a real serious concern, and I know that these type of issues are not easily fought, and I know that towns don't have a lot of teeth when it comes to these, but I would encourage our town to think about the fact that there's going to be such a significant solar array on a parcel that's currently being farmed right now, which is also has wetlands on it, which, you know, I believe they're talking about trenching through the wetlands to put some electrical conduits to. So I wanted to put it on the radar. I know it's not really for discussion today, but I have some concern about it, and I'm hoping that, you know, the rest of you end up having some concern about it as well once this thing gets a little bit more legs.
Thank you, Paul. Self-insurance, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But before I begin, it looks like does Councilwoman DiPaolo have a comment for Paul?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Please, Val, I'm sorry I missed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Just a very quick question, Paul. Any further discussion with, I know Sherry Garino had sent that email about the class of 2020 and the planting.
Yeah, I haven't she hasn't reached out beyond that. I haven't heard more about it.
Okay.
So
Just thought it was a nice idea.
Yeah, it is a nice idea. I think it's a great idea to continue to build on some of the things that have been going on there. But yeah, I haven't heard from her on it. Maybe we should reach out and find out, you know, what the plans were, and if she's matured and matured the idea a little bit more.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, Chris?
Just to go along with that conversation, I don't know if Tim Cannellan is still here or Terry Carmody, but I attended the Board of Ed meeting last week, and they're obviously talking about all things related to graduation. So we should probably loop them in the conversation as well. Again, I don't know if they're still here or if they left for the evening, but I'd suggest we get them involved as well.
Okay, very good. Okay, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last Wednesday, April 22nd, Councilman Poulos and myself, along with the rest of the Self-Insurance Committee, we met by teleconference. Very, very interesting meeting. May have been the most interesting meeting on all my years in self-insurance, just because of the uncertain times that we're in, dealing with the COVID-19 and how that impacts our health insurance plan. The March claims were about $50,000 over budget just on a 1 month basis. Overall, fiscal year 2020, which has 3 months remaining, we are about $330,000 under budget. So, you know, the plan is running very well, but, you know, that's the word from the consultant. So we did have to review the current projections for fiscal year 2020, 2021. And I know we spoke about this at our last council meeting. And just to give some people some background on this, back in when we met in March, we reviewed the numbers that were through February from a self-insurance standpoint, and the consultant projection was about $24,250,000. Now, the entire self-insurance committee said, guys, let's take a pause. We want to leave it at our original estimate, which was $24,750,000. We didn't want to go down at that time in March. So good news for our April meeting, the projection went down to about 23.9 million. Now, the consultant was very clear with us, and he stated that it was consistent amongst the insurance consultants with other towns and other clients that they have. They have not factored in any risk exposure that the COVID-19 poses to the municipalities. So the self-insurance committee was all in agreement that we should go higher than what the recommended level was. So we talked about a few different numbers, and the final vote came down, I think it was 5-1 vote for $24,250,000, which is about $350,000 above the consultant's recommendation. So that was a very good discussion on that. And lastly, we just updated some minor wording adjustments on our self-insurance fund policy. And I should point out too that the fund balance for the self-insurance fund is $7.2 million. So it's a very healthy fund. So I think we kind of mixed a lot of different issues into that decision making. So, you know, I assume that there will be some questions. I guess Councilman Poulos may want to add some items to that.
Yeah, just one comment. Your numbers are great, Tom. Thank you. I want to comment on the one dissenting vote, because you did mention that we all came together and there was one concerned vote. And I think that the concern there was that the numbers that we have are based on past trend. And with the COVID-19 situation, we don't know about future circumstances. The things we do know is like elective surgeries have been postponed. So clearly, like, our numbers are going to be good because claims aren't being made, because people aren't going to get an elective procedure or they're not getting dental work done. And so, you know, I think it's important to just to represent that dissenting opinion that while looking at past trend, we're running very well, but there's still an uncertainty about what might happen in the future and when these claims are going to come in, and, you know, what would be the repercussion of a participant in our plan or multiple participants in our plan on a ventilator. We're talking about several $100,000 claims. And so we are, based on past trend, in a good spot. And the committee did vote to with about $350,000 above the past trend. And so I just think it's important that we have that perspective represented in this report.
Yeah, and I think I'll add one more thing to that, Councilman Poulos, that the trend, there's this word that's used, the trend, it's an actuarial value that the consultants use when they come up with their estimates. There was another member on the committee who was concerned about the trend that was being used, even though our consultant said he was pretty comfortable with it. So when he did plug in the higher trend, the number went up to, I believe it was 24.1. So even with the higher trend estimate, we were still above. So yeah, Councilman Poulos brings up a good point. The trend is all about how the actuaries plug in the numbers to come up with a good estimate for the committee.
Very good. Are there any other special committees? Hearing none, we're going to be moving on. Town managers report and communications, please. Mark?
Good evening, Madam Chair. How are you?
Good evening.
We had a relatively brief meeting at the Board of Finance. Page 7 is the important stuff. We had the consent agenda, which was approved. There was some transfers, specifically the transfer that you should, the most important transfer was to replenish our capital fund for road restoration. As Chairman Leary mentioned, they had to cut some out of there, so we're trying to put some money in there through some capital fund things that we're not going to need anymore. Thank you to the council. Last year, you allowed us to do a private-public partnership for a truck wash, which is coming into town. So that saved us about $410,000 for building our own truck wash. So that's going to be distributed from the capital fund into road account. And then he also mentioned TRB, which is the teacher retirement, $270,000, which was also going to be put into the roads. So perfectly blunt, we're trying to piece together our road projects for this year. I know I said my goal was $3 million. Don't know if I'll get there, but we've been trying to do that, and we're on our way. But as you know, hopefully this will be the last year we have to piece it together budget-wise, assuming we have the public support come November. So that's really what happened to the Board of Finance. Any questions on that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do.
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Town Manager, for the report. There was one item where I think was a typo, but could be confusing to the public, and I'm just pulling it up here. It was related to a comment that John Leary made.
Okay.
It's on page 9, the second to last paragraph. It said, the chair said when we went through budget, it became clear that the vote was for 24.2 increase. And there was another plan for the 0. I think that's supposed to be 2.42%.
Okay.
So just double check.
I'll double check the page 9, make sure. I'll discuss it with Linda tomorrow.
Yeah, and the other comment or question I had was that on page 3, Amelia, the finance director, made a mention that she was understaffed and having a hard time getting a few things done. She actually said we are shorthanded.
Yep.
I just want to get an understanding on. I assume that that's related to.
Yeah, we're
virus.
because of distance aspects of it. Amelia or her assistant is in the office every day, along with 2 to 3 staff members. We can't possibly staff the whole office and keep the distance. So the office is working as well as possible, but we are not at full complement at the finance department as of now.
So I guess my question there is are we pursuing action to allow them to work from home? Are they able to work from home?
They are working from home, but it's perfectly blunt. It's not the same. It's not the same. Not having the information that's here for the finance division. They're able to do projects at home, but it's just not the same as having them here in direct contact with the administration. So,
by her saying shorthanded, it's all related to the COVID-19. I thought it's not related to somebody being out of the office or whatever else.
That division is. I think my office is the only thing that's fully staffed right now in the town. We're doing short offices just about everywhere.
Gotcha. That's all I had on the Board of Finance. Thank you.
I had a quick question, Madam Chair, on the Board of Finance.
Sure, go ahead, Paul.
One topic that came to my mind was a little bit earlier, and I wasn't sure whether to bring it up during the Board of Ed discussion. And maybe, Mark, this is something for future follow-up, so just let me know. You know, there's the discussion about carryover, and reading a little bit about the history of carryover with town government and Board of Education. I see that the Board of Finance, when they implemented the excess budget that was carried over into the undesignated fund. Is it called undesignated fund?
It's specifically the Board of Education carryover fund.
The Board of Ed carryover fund. I noticed that there's a process by which the Board of Finance approves the carryover, and they approve specific capital items that need to be or that will be funded, and then that also gets sent to Town Council for approval. one of the questions that I have is,
It gets sent to me first for my approval, and then it moves on. Yeah.
and then it moves on. And one of the questions that I had was, I don't recall finding any minutes for how the town council actually looked at the very specific items that need to be approved and voted to approve them. I wonder if we've just been, assuming, or should I say, I wonder if we're either missing it or if there's a misinterpretation of how these things should be approved, because I know that we approve the meeting minutes like we do today, but I'm not sure that by merely approving the meeting minutes, at least my understanding would be that, we're not approving a specific line item in the meeting minutes, meaning that we agree with or support those recommendations, and maybe we should.
What you're approving, you approve the concept of the minutes, but what you're approving under the charter, what you're required to approve is exactly what I just talked about. If you want to look at page 7, section 8, where it talks about the actual votes of funding. Those are the things that the council has to approve on. And then give you an example. For instance, when you vote on this, I go through this section. I don't go through all the policy discussions that they make and all that kind of stuff. What I do is I bring up the consent agenda, which is obviously that's money in, money out. That's irrelevant. But usually under my manager memos, if you don't, and the council has done this in the past, if you don't agree with something, you have the opportunity to pull it out, debate it, and down if you wish. Or if the Board of Finance says, no, we don't like the manager's memo, we voted down, you have the right to pull it out. And with 6 votes, you can overrule them. So that's why, and I understand that the concept has been going on for a while, and if there's some confusion with the newer members, but the minutes, the wholehearted minutes that you're approving are the ones that are under the actual financial actions of the Board of Finance. And they normally are covered under where it talks about 2 aspects of it. There's the consent agenda and the manager's memo. That's where all the transfers and appropriations and all that stuff takes place. So yes, you're approving the minutes, but if the Board of Finance says we want to establish an internal policy that we want a 5-member committee of this, you're approving the minutes, but you don't necessarily approve of that because you don't have the authority to say yes or no to that. But under the charter, the consent agenda, manager's memos, those are specific items where if you vote yes, those are what you're approving. If you don't want to vote yes, you pull it out, debate it, and vote no, or vice versa. You can overrule them.
Mark, will you always have your items spiked out for town council to review those?
They're in every minute. They're in the minutes. Every one of the minutes, the Board of Finance minutes, it'll talk about manager's memo. Those will be specific manager's memos. It'll say in there what the transfer is for, what the appropriation is for, and what the motion was with the Board of Finance.
Gotcha. So that's the area that we need to be paying attention to when it comes time for carryover, to look for the details there.
Yeah, and I think that my memory is good, but it's not perfect when it comes to when that issue came up with you guys. Would have been last October, November, December, whatever it was. The Board of Finance went specifically through the items, and it would have been under a manager's memo where the money would have been carried over into the specific line item with those specific items. And matter of fact, I remember the motion was made for the items that were actually on there, and there was like 150, 190 left over, which we talked about putting that toward the eventual parking lot at the high school. So that's what would have been there.
That's good to know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Not bad of a memory for an old guy, right, Paul?
For sure.
Anything else, Mark? Transfer station operation.
Well, I would like to say that I'd be the first to say this, but Mr. Del Santo, as is his right, talked about this already. I want to thank, obviously, our guys. The guys at the Highway Parks did an excellent job. The way it was set up. I want to thank the PD. They did a great job. But most importantly, it was almost, I was there for about an hour and a half. And it was actually very, very cordial, very jovial. People were joking around. I think they knew that they were going to be waiting a long period of time. There was very few people having patience issues. So I'm happy about that. Also, to go on what Mr. Del Santo told you, I can't stress enough, to alleviate the problems on Saturday, please go to the transfer station this Wednesday, the 29th, or this Thursday, the 30th, from 3:30 to 6:30. And then the following Wednesday and Thursday, the 6th and the 7th, of both times are 3:30 to 6:30. Hopefully that'll alleviate the issue. We're going to have PD at the transfer station again this Saturday and probably the following Saturday. And starting with the 9th, we're going to continue on with our calendar, which is already posted on the website every Saturday thereafter until fall. So hopefully the public appreciates the fact that our guys are working to try and get back to, and I hate this term, but I'm going to use it, the new normal for Southington in the time being. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to Town Attorney's report. I believe Jeremy's there.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes, thank you.
All right, sorry. I think my video froze up about an hour ago, but I'm glad you can hear me. So the first item we have in was the Mount Vernon property that at a previous meeting that you referred over to the Planning and Zoning with the 824 for their report and approval. On that last Tuesday, I believe, and they did return a positive report. We also didn't find a need for an environmental study on this property because it's undisturbed land. There's no history of any concern of contamination on the property. So that is returned back to you guys. Do you have any questions about that?
Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Go on, please.
Lead us into our second item here. And since you got returned with a positive report from the Planning and Zoning, you guys will be voting on pushing the contract through for the purchase tonight later on. Does anybody have any questions about that? This is the Mount Vernon property.
I don't hear any questions. I think we're all set. Anything else, Attorney?
Yes, the last is a new contract proposal that is coming in front of you that you're going to need to vote on referring to the Planning and Zoning based on General Statute 824 for their approval. Just a background on this property, it is located on 471 Canal Street. Property is roughly a third of the acre. It's in the R25 zone. It is right next to the current train museum right now, and it butts the Rails to Trails. It's a property that was looked at for a little while between the open space, even before my time, and it was a property that the Open Space Committee thought was valuable as for its location, right to connect to some town property right there. I don't know if anybody has specific questions about this, but I'm more than happy to try to answer your questions.
Attorney Taylor, on the Canal Street property, do we need to put it on for an action this evening? This evening?
Yes, there is going to be an action to refer to the for their study and approval that it works with their conservation and planning.
Okay, very good. So do
Chair, it's there. It's letter E. No, it's there. It's letter E.
Letter E.
Letter E.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm working off of two different agendas. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yep. It's on there for letter E. Okay. Very good. Anything else, Attorney Taylor?
No, I don't have anything further tonight, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Jeremy? Hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Town's Attorney. Public communication, Paul. This is going to be very interesting. We have a number of people from the public. They may want to speak. So you're going to take the mute off.
There's not as many left, but I'm going to, anybody that's a call in, I will open the mic. It looks like we have 3. Why don't we do the call-in folks who are first? If you're on a phone calling in, public communications now, please let us know if you have anything that you would like to state with public communications.
I would just add that you still need to state your name and address. And remember, you're under a 5-minute rule. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to address this council?
Yes, hi, Mel Hobson, Mary Ellen Hobson, 113 Blatchley Avenue. I come to you tonight as a member of the Main Directors and also a member of the Barnes Memorial Trust at the foundation. I've been asked to share this with you tonight. The Barnes Memorial Trust is interested in meeting the critical and immediate needs of Southington, especially as it relates to the health and well-being of residents impacted by COVID-19. If there are current unmet needs that need to be addressed, we are interested in learning more to see how we can fund or partner with organizations to meet those identified needs. Thank you very much.
Mel, that's a wonderful opportunity for folks, and I would just suggest if there are groups or folks that are especially in need, that they would contact Main Street. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Vicki.
That would be terrific. Please thank Main Street for once again stepping up to handle the needs of our community and partner with us. They are vital to Southington and her people. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just open the phones again one more time, just to make sure that there's nobody that we missed. I'm going to open it up here. Phone lines are open for any call-in. Anybody else have anything that they would like to share in public communications?
Going once.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll shut the mics on those three phone lines.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for those that are listening in by phone. I think that's it then for public communication then. Is that correct, Paul? Very good. Thank you so much. Let's go to old business. Item A, action on the Board of Finance minutes.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the Board of Finance minutes from April 15th, 2020 with the mentioned updates, adjustments that I referenced earlier.
Thank you, Tom. Do I have a second?
Second from Jim.
Jim Morelli seconded. Thank you so much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Item B, action on the 824 for the Mount Vernon, road property. Mike, I see your hand.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Who seconded?
That's Jim.
Oh, Jim seconded. Fine, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, could we have a voice vote, please?
Morelli,
Yes.
Palmieri,
No.
Pulis,
No.
Chaplinsky,
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
DiPaolo,
No.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes. Motion carries. Item C, action on the contract for the Mount Vernon Road property.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve that.
Sure, second.
Madam Chair, I second that.
Thank you, Jim. Let's have a voice vote on that as well.
Morelli,
Yes.
Palmieri,
No.
Pulis,
No.
Chaplinsky,
Yes.
Del Santo,
Yes.
DiPaolo,
No.
Lombardi,
Yes.
Triano.
Yes, and thank you, everybody. It's a beautiful piece of property. Thank you. The action on the library board ordinance, Paul?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion on the library board ordinance to postpone the library board ordinance vote. So I'd like to make a motion to table.
I'll second.
Chris Palmieri just seconded it. All those in favor?
Madam Chair, I know you're not.
Oh,
It's a procedural comment. It's not debate. So what I just want to do is, because the way it's phrased, I'll be having to putting it back on the agenda. My suggestion would be that if we table it administratively, I'll put it back on at the discretion of the chair.
Yes,
I'll amend my motion then.
and Chris, will you amend your second?
And Mark, I thought I thought through our discussion, it was table it until discussions for the 21-22 budget.
That's my understanding too. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't have to put it on every agenda.
If
So
that's okay, I'd like to ask Paul if he would make.
I'm happy to amend my motion, Chris.
Okay, and I'll second for the 21-22 budget cycle.
Great. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
I would say, Madam Chair, just, again, thanks for all those involved who have gotten us to where we were. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Excellent.
Rookie.
Any other comments?
No comments on Shane.
Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. And our new business, our tax refunds. Val, do you have them?
Chair, you forgot E. Madam Chair, you forgot
Madam Chair.
Wait a minute, Val. Wait a minute. Item E. I told you I'm working off of two agendas here. Item E. Mike.
That's the 824 referral for Canal Street.
I'll make a motion to approve that, Madam Chair.
Second.
And Chris, did you second it, Chris Poulos? Second by Chris Poulos. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Now, Val, we're clear for the tax refunds.
Madam Chair, I will make a motion that we approve the tax refunds as outlined in our packet.
I'll second, Madam Chair. This is Paul.
Second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Good. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. I'll accept a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Chair.
Everybody made the motion. That's wonderful.
Hang out for a little while if you want.
That's right. Thank you, everybody. It was a long meeting, but we had to get through some important stuff. So thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, town manager, everybody that's involved. Thank you so much. We'll see you. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Take
Good
care.
night. Sure.